Welcome to Better In or Outer South East Today Referendum Special. Our audience will have the opportunity tonight to discuss what pundits and politicians are calling the most important decision of our lifetime. On Thursday, the 23rd of June, the UK will vote either to remain in or leave the European Union. Our security, our economy, our sovereignty and our place in the world will all be defined by this vote. We'll be speaking to leading figures in the vote leave and vote remain camps. And you can join in the debate at home. You can use the hashtag EURefSoutheast on our Facebook and Twitter pages. And the BBC website is running a live page on the programme. Well, immigration is one of the most important but also most emotive issues for voters. And our first question comes from Zoe Bowden, a teacher from Folkestone. Zoe.
With the Archbishop of Canterbury's comments today backing Remain and urging people not to succumb to our worst instincts on migration, is the Leave campaign guilty of using fear for political gain?
Leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage.
No, we're going to use hope. And hope comes from having properly controlled borders. Hope comes from having an immigration policy that allows full integration within our society. Hope comes from knowing that the policy we pursued for 60 years after World War II, of having a managed, balanced net migration running at 30 to 40,000 people a year, that led to us having the best race relations, the best integration of any country in Europe, and what we're saying is we've lost control of it.
But the question refers to what the Archbishop of Canterbury has been saying, and he's picking you up on referring to sex attacks in Cologne and striking fear into people in this country. Is that the right tone?
It's a great shame the Archbishop of Canterbury didn't read the article and not just the headline.
But you did say it on LBC as well, didn't you?
Well, I said a long time ago we should be worried, although there's far more to be worried about than that. I mean, look, we found out overnight that the Germans managed to stop a serious bomb plot in Dusseldorf, and well done them for doing it. 3 of the 4 people implicated in that came into Germany last year posing as refugees and migrants, which goes to show we need to be sensible and careful about who we allow into Europe and ultimately who we allow into Britain. The Archbishop takes his position. I would be surprised if the Archbishop didn't. However, one of his predecessors, George Carey, is a backer of the Brexit case, and what you find in this referendum is people who are in their jobs, like the Governor of the Bank of England or the Archbishop, support the government, support the status quo. You look at those who've retired, they take a different position. I can promise you one thing. If we get Brexit, we get proper border controls, we will have, with a sensible immigration policy, this issue will disappear off the agenda because the majority of people will be content.
Zoe?
Sitting in Dover, this town has been the scene of violent protests for months now against immigration. You said on Thursday night that having non-EU passports would prevent jihadis entering the country. You are wrong. You are using inaccurate facts to play on people's fears. It's wrong. If you're going to get your purple passport out and say that it should be English,
here it is again.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. You play the same card time after time. I think you are.
Nigel Farage.
Yes, I think if you want us to be a safe and secure country, do you know these are for sale in Cyprus for €3,000 to anybody that's prepared to pay the price.
OK, I think that's a bit time I've seen that passport this week. Let's go to Damien Green. Is it possible, is it plausible that the fact that your government claimed that it could bring immigration down to the tens of thousands in its manifesto, and it hasn't, has that given Mr Farage and the people who speak in the way that he does the oxygen of publicity? Is it allowed them to step into the gap?
Well, no one, under any circumstances, has permission to try and use immigration to stir up discontent and hatred in this country. Because it's a very dangerous thing. Because it's a very dangerous thing to do.
Who was actually here at the Radio 5 live programme, started by making the comment that Cameron had very much let the country down. That is one of the reasons why vote leave is as strong as it is.
Damien Green?
Fine. Let me address that directly. Of course, I would like to see, the government would like to see lower immigration numbers. As a matter of fact, more than half immigration to this country comes from outside the EU. So Nigel is very interesting. He just talked about 30 to 40,000. There were 188,000 net migration from outside the EU last year. If you want to get it down to 40,000, then no business in this country will be allowed to bring anyone into this country under any circumstances.
But the issue is that if you've not been able to bring those numbers down, just a moment, if you've not been able to bring those numbers down and you remain in the EU, the pressure on services will only get greater, won't it? Because we have to accept free movement of people, and your government hasn't been able to control non-EU migration.
I accept that. Let me deal directly, particularly with the pressure on public services, which I think drives a lot of this debate. And I think that the root of it is that reasonable people accept that there are different types of immigration, that we have got many tens of thousands of people in this country who work hard, they pay their taxes, those taxes help pay for our public services, and we want those people here. There are other people coming here, maybe for less good reasons. One of the things that the Prime Minister achieved in the renegotiation was a cutting off of the capacity to come here and claim benefits. That's precisely what he achieved.
Other countries place restrictions on migration that allows them to control the numbers in the way that we don't.
We place restrictions on migration, and we have brought migration down. We've closed 800. We've closed 800. We've closed 800 bogus colleges, for example, which was an effective way of stopping people who are coming here to try to exploit the system. Again, another fact. People want facts in this debate. The number of migrants from the European Economic Area, the European Union, in this country is actually 6% of our workforce, so it's not huge. But the point about pressure on public services, I absolutely take. And I would just refer people to my colleague Sarah Wollaston, who's not just chair of the Health Select Committee. She's a doctor. She knows about the health service. And she makes the extremely good point that if you meet an immigrant in the health service, you're much more likely to be treated by them than to be standing in a queue behind them.
I'd like to come to Lord Howard. On that point, I'd like to come to Lord Howard. On the point that Sarah Wollaston made, that you're more likely to come across a migrant worker in a hospital than someone being in front of you in the queue, do you think it's helpful to vote leave that Nigel Farage, for example, raises the spectre of sex attacks in Cologne?
I didn't.
Do you think it's helpful?
I didn't.
Well, you did on LBC.
Well, 6 months ago, but in this campaign I haven't mentioned it. I mean, this was a bizarre newspaper headline, so get that straight.
Right.
Well,
I'm a bit of a maverick on this subject of immigration, because I don't believe this referendum should be about the level of immigration into our country. But what it should be about, and is about, is who should decide the level of immigration into our country. You see, there are people, like Damien, who think the current level is fine, and there are other people who think it's too high. But that's an argument that we ought to be able to have in this country. That's an argument that we ought to be able to decide in this country. And we can't decide it in this country as long as we remain members of the European Union. We can't decide it here because we have no control whatever on the 333,000 who came in last year from the European Union.
And on that
it's
point,
a question of regaining control.
Lord
and
Howard,
that's what this referendum is about.
And I would just like to put that point to Peter Kyle, because the figures show... Peter Kyle, can I just bring the attention to figures in Kent that show that since 2012, the number of children with a first language from recently joined accession states in the EU has risen by 49%. That's since 2012. There's an undeniable pressure on public services, isn't there?
We live in a globalising world, and Britain is at the forefront of globalisation. We've also seen the impact in two profound ways, both on our economy and with the free movement of people. And there are our nation as a whole has benefited hugely from both. But there are certain people, certain communities, and yes, some towns who have been left behind from the prosperity that our nation has gained. And I am somebody who wants us to remain in the European Union, but I have tremendous sympathy for the people who are impacted by both migration, plus who look on as our nation grows in prosperity but sees that the high street is closing down. We in the south of England have been most affected by that. But I tell you, The answer is not the one that you're being sold from the other side on this debate. And I really worry that if we leave the European Union, you will not see the direct impact and the immediate impact on migration that you think, because every other country who is not in the European Union but is part of the free trade area is also part of the free movement of people, every single one of them. So I worry, and also that most migration coming into this country is not from the EU. That our economy is a globalised economy and it needs labour that comes in from abroad, and that's the thing that's very, very difficult to control. The reason the government is trying to...
I do want to pick you up on the point that you said you've been misled by the opposition, because
well, I said that they didn't have the right
answer. There's an accusation that Labour is letting down its core vote, who are genuinely concerned about levels of immigration in this country and the impact on their communities.
Well, I've not said that we've been misled, and I say that I have sympathy for the people who are here.
But I'd like you to answer the point. Is Labour failing its core vote in this campaign?
The question is that the Archbishop of Canterbury says that people are being misled by the other side. It is actually the IMF that says it. It is almost every single independent...
But what about the Labour Party addressing concerns of its own voters over immigration?
Well, this is exactly what I'm trying to say, is that there are absolutely communities who have been left behind as the country moves forward. And this is because of domestic... It's not every town... No, it is not every town and city. It's actually not... it's not every town and city. It's actually many towns and cities are doing rather well. It's the smaller towns, and particularly the coastal ones, that are really struggling. And this is the solution to this. This is very important, because the solution to this actually rests with domestic politics and domestic decisions. The European Union is not going to decide about the future of Dover. You've been let down by a Conservative government that is spending money in the wrong areas, that is dragging your public services into the ground, that is not training enough doctors and nurses, that is not equipping our young people with the right skills. These are decisions taken by our government, not in Brussels.
Thank you. I will be able to hear you if you stop shouting over each other. Now, can I speak to the gentleman in the brown jacket?
You. Don't you think that all this problems with our labour shortages, as they put it, is all the politicians of all parties have let us down? They've let people come in, they seem to model their things on Parkinson's law. It's like having a tank with water leaking at the bottom, but all they've done is put a bigger hose in the top.
OK, sir, thank you.
I've got no problem with immigration or migration, and I agree with you, we need people, come. But are you happy to bring all these people and to give them the handout and give them money and give them houses and to look after them, and they don't even contribute
thank you, sir. Can I just come to
country?
the gentleman with the tie in the front row?
The Leave campaign...
Sir, could you let this gentleman speak?
The Leave campaign, to the best of my knowledge, have given figures of something like 350 million a week going to the EU. Does that take into account the rebate coming back?
No.
Well, it doesn't, does it? It's 275 million, isn't it?
Look,
No.
money goes out, money comes back. But you know something? Even if we argue what the net figure is, the net figure is £34 billion a day. That's unarguable. The net figure is 10... The net figure is 10
But £350 million doesn't leave the country,
we have a
does
rebate
it?
and we get money back.
Okay.
But let's put it like this, sir. £10 billion a year as a net contribution to a club brings no benefit to this country whatsoever, and we could spend that better here.
We will touch upon the economy in a moment. I'd like to go to our next questioner, Sarah Chivers. She's a medical manager from Dover, and this follows on to what you were talking about security.
Bearing in mind the group of Albanians that arrived in a dinghy in Dymchurch a couple of weeks ago and the Iranians that arrived yesterday, I believe, in Hastings, can the EU really keep our borders safe and under control?
Thank you. Eleanor Harris, Chief Executive of the I360. You'll have a better view of the coastline than most of us. Now, I wonder, how do you convince people living in Kent and Sussex on the Remain side who see stories every other day at the moment about people arriving in Dymchurch on small boats or Hastings, that the border is secure when they can see it being breached?
I'm not an expert on security or on people arriving on boats from far parts of the world. I'm not sure that that's really got to do very much with whether we stay in the EU or not.
It certainly is. I'll tell you exactly how. I'll give you a very specific example. of how we can't control our borders and make ourselves safe because of our membership of the European Union. The Home Secretary has always had the power to refuse entry into our country from someone who he or she, the Home Secretary, thought was not conducive to the public good. But there's a case in which the Home Secretary, happened to be a Labour Home Secretary in 2005, wanted to refuse entry to our country to someone whom he knew was involved in terrorism. He knew was involved in terrorism. And the European Court of Justice said that because this person was a French citizen, we had to let him in. We have to let in people who we know are involved in terrorism because we are subject to the decisions of the European Court of Justice.
I know
that's
that's a particular bugbear of yours, but I would just like to bring it back to the border security issue at the moment. If you want to continue,
Sure.
Eleanor Harris.
I mean, I was working at the London Eye when the July bombs happened, and I think it's unfair for us to look abroad and blame people from abroad for terrorism. We have our own homegrown terrorism problems. And actually, what I do know is that we work collaboratively with our friends and neighbours in the EU to tackle this, as well as our friends in NATO. And this is a global problem, and we're stronger together, working alongside our neighbours.
That point to Maria Corfer, because working together does seem to be a better way of sharing information, in the opinion of the Remain side. Leaving, you remove yourself from security organisations like Europol, which mean that you're no longer sharing that information successfully across borders within the EU.
Well, there's a couple of points I'd like to make. It's not the job of the EU to manage our borders. The most common comment I get when I knock on doors and speak to people who voted to join the EU was that they were joining a trade agreement, a single market. There are other bodies that we will be part of if we leave, such as the UN, such as NATO, that are in charge of security. And actually, just because we leave the EU doesn't mean we leave Europe. It doesn't mean we stop working with partners. And I represent a town called Newhaven, which is fairly similar to Dover. It's a port town, we've got a ferry going to France, and I've been over to Dieppe, where the ferry goes from my town in Newhaven, and I've seen economic migrants camped out on the side there, trying to run onto the ferry as it leaves at night. And because I've met with them, and I will tell you something. If you meet with them, you will hear their harrowing stories. This is what the EU has done to them. There's young men in Italy, in Spain, in Greece, where youth unemployment is over 50%. That's why they want to come to the UK, because we are the 5th largest economy in the world. We have a living wage. We've got good job prospects. That's why they're trying to get here. And until we tackle the issue of why people are coming, we're not going to be able to manage our borders properly.
But we're not inside the Schengen zone. We have border control. We can check people's passports. So the issue of how well controlled our border is down to us, isn't it?
Well, it is, but what will happen, although we're not part of Schengen, what will happen in the long term is while those migrants are in places like Germany and France, once they've been there for a period of years, I think Hungary it's 3 years, they can become EU citizens, and then they will be able to come to the UK quite freely with free movement of people.
I'd like to go to Peter Kyle on this. Peter.
Oh, I've got so much to say on this. It's almost incredible. But directly to the question, we need to take control of our own borders, and we can. We have 3 cutters patrolling 7,700 miles of British coastline. 3 cutters. The French have 15 times the amount of border resources that we do. We are in control of our own borders, but Theresa May cut the resources and said it wouldn't impact on our ability to patrol our borders. She was wrong. It is domestic policy. We look to our government, our Home Secretary, to keep our borders safe and secure from people who are not in the European Union. The three people who were fished out of a boat in Hastings yesterday were from Iran. We have a problem with people trying to get illegally to our country who are from outside the European Union. But the key thing is this. I spoke to the head of MI5 recently on a visit to MI6 and all of the security agencies. Every one of them said they have an incredibly close working relationship with all of the security agencies across the EU. Now, it's possible if we leave that will stay the same. But it is working very well now. Why put it at risk? And if I can say one further thing, it will take 10 seconds.
I was a nurse right up until the general election, so I've seen the impact of immigration on the health service. And what I hear from people in my town of Newhaven, which is fairly similar to Dover, with high unemployment and the high street closing, is it's the ordinary person who feels the impact of illegal immigration, who are undercutting the wages of British workers.
The highest satisfaction ratings in history. When Labour left office, the NHS had the highest satisfaction ratings in history.
In a Conservative Labour battle. Let's go to the gentleman in the far right corner with the glasses, please. Yes, sir. Yes. No, the chap behind you, sorry.
Hello, I'd like to say to the guy at the end there, that's a load of tosh. The people that all they have to do is make it to this country. They don't even have to get their feet. They don't have to get their feet wet. Them cutters will pick them up.
Are you talking about refugees or economic migrants?
I don't care what you call them this week. Right. These people are trying to gain. They are trying to gain illegal entry to this country. We don't know who they are. Once they're on this soil, they never get sent back. They're here. What do you have to say about that? We cannot send them back.
OK, let's come back to Damien Green on that point. Can you respond to that gentleman?
We do know who people are.
Sir, could you let Damien Green speak?
Because the original question was a very good one, but it was about Albanians, who are not members of the European Union, and Iranians, who are not members of the European Union. So actually, the debate on... Excuse me, madam, can I finish? If they come through France, and they come through other European countries, but actually... Leaving the EU doesn't solve the Middle East. It doesn't solve the problems in North Africa. There will still be millions of people trying to come here. To answer directly the gentleman at the back, we do know, because we're involved in European systems like ECRIS, the Criminal Records Information System, it means that if they are EU nationals, 84% of them can be checked. Their criminal records can be checked when they enter this country. We have the SIS system, which allows us to check for terrorist suspects as well. This, I'm afraid, is increasingly necessary.
But if these systems are so safe, why has a former head of counter-terrorism at Scotland Yard urged the government to tighten border procedures to make, and I quote, make Britain safer? You can
always tighten border procedures, just like you can always improve policing. The fact that, as we speak, there's probably a burglary being committed somewhere within 5 miles of here doesn't mean the police are failing. It just means we need to redouble our efforts. Of course we do, with border control. But those border controls are made better by the fact that we have these institutions within the European Union that allow us to exchange information on a daily and hourly basis. Without those, we would be less safe.
Says that we are safer because of those institutions.
And what he says, the basis of his argument that we're safer, is that we can check 84% of the people who come in from the European Union, who are citizens of the European Union, to see if they have a criminal record. Maybe, but we can't do anything about it. We can't send them back because the European Court of Justice stops us from sending them back. So there's nothing we can do about it. We can check them and find out, and then we're powerless.
Let's move on to the economy. Daniel Oakes is a civil servant. He's from Canterbury. Daniel.
What is so awful about our relationship with Europe that we're contemplating putting a bomb under the economy?
Maria Caulfield.
Well, if we vote to leave and take control on June the 23rd, that does not mean we stop trading with Europe. Because if you look at the current trade arrangements we have with them, they actually export more to us than we do to them. So if you're seriously saying that France will stop selling their wine and cheese to us, Germany will stop selling their cars to us, and they'll want to put tariffs on that, I completely disagree. But even if they did, if we come out of the EU and on June the 24th they suddenly say they did want tariffs, and tariffs go both ways, the average tariff is about 4.3%. That's about £7.9 billion a year. That's still less than what we pay net currently at the moment. But what it would do is allow us to trade with other countries and have free trade agreements, which we currently can't do outside of the EU. And 80% of the world's economics is outside the EU. And the EU is a failing trading bloc. When we joined in the 70s, it was responsible for 37% of world GDP. It's now down to 22% and falling. And the only continent that's got a worse growth than the EU is Antarctica.
I'd like Eleanor Harris to pick up on this point. So Maria Caulfield's point that the EU argues as a bloc, so individual British interests and individual British businesses are not represented in that system. As a chief executive of a company who's worked for BA, and I know you've worked for other big organisations, can you see that argument? Do you think it's valid?
You know, I speak as an employer, and I speak as someone who's worked in the tourism sector for 20 years. And actually, I've only seen benefits that the EU has brought us. In the tourism sector, 2/3 of all of our visitors come from the EU. We benefit from the Open Skies Agreement, which has brought all of us cheaper air travel. But actually, as well as it brings cheaper travel for us to go to Spain, it means all the Spanish can come here for cheaper. It means that travel between Europe is much easier. And actually, we have an access to a massive, massive market, 500 million people. That's where we sell most of our goods and services. I am, quite frankly, terrified about what will happen if we leave the EU.
Nigel Farage.
It will throw us into recession. I think it will put at risk millions of jobs in this country and bring on services.
Nigel Farage.
We joined this to have tariff-free access to the European market. That was the reason we joined the European Club. Okay?
And that's what we've got.
Yeah, but the point is this. Those tariffs 45 years ago were very high. It was a post-war world of distrust. We are now living through an age of globalisation, whereas Maria quite rightly said, those tariffs have come down to levels that are so small that for an exporter, the monthly foreign exchange risk is much higher.
So what is the plan?
So,
because what Daniel's asking is, you're putting a time bomb under the economy because you don't have a plan.
Let me say this to you. Any idea you may get from Mr Cameron or others that we have a good deal with the European Union that benefits the British economy is wrong.
How can you get better than
we have an absolutely...
Well, I'm not saying David Cameron's
if we had... If we had a tariff-free deal with our European neighbours, that would be the right relationship. We don't. We are prohibited from making our own trade deals anywhere else in the world. We are beggaring many of our small and medium-sized businesses. Look at the fishing industry off the coast right here at Dover.
But the truth is you're not necessarily in charge of negotiating the deal that we come up with were we to vote to leave. And any government that wants a part of the single market could end up in a situation where our laws are still being dictated by the EU, but we have no say over
This is the biggest fallacy in the whole debate. We hear that to have access to the single market, we have to obey by all the rules, we have to pay a contribution, we have to have free movement. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Every country in the world has access to the single market, and if, no, they don't pay for it, Damien. South Korea doesn't pay.
Norway pays $8 billion.
Because Norway is part of the single market.
Iceland pays billions.
And Iceland is part of a single market. This side of the table does not want to be part of the single market cartel. We are voting for the independence of our nation in this referendum and a simple free trade deal, which, by the way, is what my mum and dad thought they were voting for 40 years ago.
So, Damien Green, Nigel Farage doesn't believe that we need to be part of the single market.
Well, Nigel may want to take a risk with our biggest single export market. 44% of our exports go to the rest of the European Union. 8% come the other way. So the idea that they need us more than we need them is just statistical nonsense.
How many German cars are on the road?
Quite apart from all the trade arguments, is the inward investment argument. One of the reasons... I'm sorry?
40% of the European Union is nearly bankrupt. You're ignoring that point by remaining in Europe. How is that going to help us as an independent nation?
Well, how is leaving going to help Greece and Italy recover?
No economics.
You talk about...
Can you allow Damien Green
Can I talk about inward investment? Because that's actually one of the reasons why our economy has created 2.5 million new jobs in the last 6 years. And it's a reason... The reason is that around the world, people look at Britain and they see a highly educated workforce, a relatively deregulated economy, the second most deregulated economy in the world after, incidentally, the Netherlands, which is also a member of the European Union. And they see that combined with the fact that our home market is not just our 65 million relatively prosperous citizens, it's 500 million people. And if you're a big international company taking an investment decision, if we leave, then you're going to have to say, will I put that new plant in a market of 65 million people, or will I put it in a market of 450 million people? It's a no-brainer. Investment will come less for this country.
Lord Howard.
This is exactly the same kind of argument that Damien's friends used to put forward when they were urging us to join the euro. Absolutely. They said if you don't join the euro, inward investment will dry up, the city will collapse, all sorts of terrible things would happen. They didn't happen, and they won't happen if we leave the European Union.
Right. This gentleman's had his hand up for a long time. Can we come to this gentleman?
Say time in question time. Mr Farage did actually state that GDP would be negatively affected if we left the EU. Could he expand on that point?
Yes,
please?
I could. GDP...
Doesn't matter, does it?
GDP is going up. One of the reasons it's going up is the population is going up. What is not going up is GDP per capita.
It's gone up in every one of the last 7 years.
For the rich, Damien.
No.
Let's be clear. Let's be clear. The European Union is good for the rich. It's good for big business. It's good for big banks.
Politics.
However, under Labour governments and Conservative governments, under both, since 2008, the living standards of the average worker in this country have fallen by 10%. So I'm saying that actually GDP per capita, and in particular for average workers, matters more than a population going up by 500,000 and conning ourselves that's making us richer, because it isn't.
Eleanor Harris, you're an employer. Yes. Can you come back on that?
Yes, thanks. Well, I am an employer, and I've been out talking to fellow business owners in my local area, which is Brighton and Hove. And actually, the sentiment that I'm hearing is that everyone's feeling that the economy's getting better at the moment. They're seeing growth in their areas. They're all beginning to take more workers on.
Absolute rubbish. We have a national...
May I finish, please?
Sir, can we allow Eleanor Harris to finish her point?
But what we're all terribly concerned about is that we're allowing some politicians, the Brexit politicians, potentially to gamble with our entire economy.
Right.
And for what? What I'm worried about is I'd like to know who gains from this, and the only people I see who gain from this are the very politicians trying to grab power.
Absolutely right.
Sir,
Absolutely right.
in the blue shirt. Yeah. No, sir, the chap behind you.
I've got to be honest, I've come here as someone who is leaning towards voting one way, and I've heard a lot of comment about scaremongering on the exit side, and listening to what the Remain side are saying and the kind of language they're using in terms of bombs under economies and what they're saying about immigration and how we're going to melt down, I think they're disgracing themselves, to be honest, on the Remain side at the moment. I'm shocked.
Can we come to this lady in the front?
Mr Green, there are countries queuing up to join the EU. If you stay in, what are you going to do then with all the extra countries? With all
Damien,
the people?
I will allow Damien Green to answer that point.
Well, I mean, nobody is going to... Sorry, can I just answer this lady's question first? Nobody is going to join for the next 5 years. The European Union has said that. And beyond that, no big country is going to join. If we're talking about Turkey, and I know the Leave campaign likes talking about Turkey.
It's your government's policy.
Turkey is not going to join for the next 20 years.
Well, why are we paying the money then?
David Cameron has said in the past he would
why are we paying the money?
Because
Turkey into the EU.
they are, I'm afraid to say, going backwards democratically. That I did.
Cameron could have put that
Please
to
let
bed.
me finish. He actually, Andrew Marr asked Mr Cameron the question, what are your thoughts on Turkey? Which is a justifiable point to make. Now, we all have seen the video clip where Nigel said, sorry, not Nigel, where Mr Cameron said that he's looking forward to Turkey joining the EU.
Thank you. I would like Damien Green to continue. Thank you.
And he said that, I think, in 2010. Since then, regrettably, in many ways, Turkey has gone backwards democratically. Every country that joins the European Union has to be a democracy. It has to fulfil 35 different criteria, qualification criteria to do that. Turkey fulfils one of them. There is not a cat in hell's chance of Turkey becoming a member of the European Union for a very long time.
Damien, I'm really sorry about this, but on March the 18th of this year, Cameron was part of a communiqué in Brussels which said they would speed up Turkish membership, point one. But more importantly, we decided in 2014, we are signed up to a programme where between then and 2020, the taxpayer is paying £1.2 billion in pre-accession aid to Turkey.
Thank you, Nigel Farage.
Why are we
Can I
paying that
come
money?
to the gentleman in the front row?
Why are we paying that money?
Thank you. I'd just like to hear from another member of the audience. Thank you.
Can I address the question?
I'd like to say that the problem with the Leave campaign is they know the price of everything but the value of nothing, and really it's disgraceful how they focus the campaign so much on immigration. I mean, I would say...
Maria Caulfield. Thank you, sir. I'm going to go to Maria Caulfield. Thank you. Can I...
My parents' generation fought a world war to prevent
Thank
getting
you,
into
sir.
power.
You're going to go to Maria Caulfield.
If you look, the original
Can
question...
we allow Maria Caulfield to speak? Thank you.
The original question was about the economy and about our trade. Now, if you look, the EU, since its inception, has only delivered £7 trillion of trade deals. If you look at Switzerland, it's delivered £39 trillion. So it shows that a country that's outside the EU can actually trade better when it's free from the shackles of
Thank you. I'd like to come back to the original question. The original question was about the economy per se. I co-founded a very small business in 2004 which exported products. Now, when we exported directly to the EU, it was as if we were selling in the UK. When we sold to America, it cost an additional 40% because of the paperwork and all the import-export charges that we had. We don't want to lose that ability to trade freely, and we'll put it on risk. Now, the IFS has estimated, that's an independent think tank, has estimated that will cost between 20 and 40 billion pounds to our economy. Now, Nigel says it's a price worth paying, and a price worth paying is also having exchange rate absolute bedlam is absolutely fine with you. I say let's put the people who are going to suffer the most from the negative impacts on our economy first. You seem to put them last.
Just respond to that, please, Nigel Farage, very briefly.
Peter, markets go up, markets go down, all right? So there's nonsense.
Don't force them to go down on purpose.
Well, if the pound went down, it'd be very good for British exportors, all right? That is not an issue. And as for the IFS, it is funded by government and the European Union.
And look how much 75%. I think we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm going to say thank you very much to the panel for joining us. Thanks to the audience for coming along. If you have an appetite for more of this, BBC Radio Kent are hosting a special programme with Lembit Opik. You can also have your say on Facebook and on Twitter using the hashtag EURefSoutheast. The BBC website is running a live page which will round up all of your comments. But from the team at BBC South...
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.